and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. So, Transformers. I'm sorry to say that I was too young to catch the very original cartoon back in the day. No, I was a child of the 90s, and as a result, I was a fan of Beast Wars and Beast Machines when they were around. Thanks to the internet, though, I was able to watch a good chunk of the cartoon, and of course, the awesome, if incredibly goofy, animated movie. And let's not get into any flame wars around here about any of the Transformers series. I expect my fans to be a lot smarter than to be irritated about Optimus Primal not being a truck, or that the newer anime-esque Transformers are too kiddie, or nonsense like that. And no, I haven't watched any of them after Beast Machines, which I liked, though Beast Wars is better, just to stave off the eventual 1,000 comments asking what my opinions are on the various series. There's room to like everything, even those moronic and brain-numbing live-action movies that contained far too many squishy humans and not enough giant robots hitting each other. For those who somehow have missed out or simply don't care about kids' shows advertising toys from the 1980s, Transformers is the story of two factions of living robots, usually Autobots and Decepticons, engaged in an eternal war for dominance. Eventually, their fight brings them to Earth, and for one contrived reason or another, they must take on an alternate mode that they transform to and from. I always found the ones that transform into tiny objects the most laughably implausible. Sure, Megatron and Soundwave are completely awesome and badass, but if they have the ability to shrink themselves into a life-size gun and a boombox respectively, why even bother with the transformation when you can just shrink down, go into Optimus Prime, and rip him apart from the inside out? And yes, I'm sure there's some explanation for that, but I don't care, since I'm here to talk to you about comic books. Like many other franchises, Transformers is no stranger to comics, and as a result, I've gotten quite a few requests to do Transformers comics. The question comes down to which ones should I do? A particular favorite for people to request is from the old Marvel Transformers comic titled The Car Wash of Doom, which pretty much says it all. Or there's always the issue where Optimus Prime feels he dishonorably won a video game and thus wants to commit suicide, but a young computer geek saves his brain on a floppy disk. Yes, that description is accurate. And yeah, I might still get to those somewhere down the line, though I've still got a soft spot in my heart for the old Marvel issues. About 5 or 10 years ago, I found a website that had scanned every issue of it, and this was before rampant comic piracy and the like. And I just went through them like mad. The plot twists, the defeats, the victories, it was all fun and glorious to me. And I kind of want to reread them before I start tearing them a new one. But thankfully, we have an alternative. Let me tell you a bit about Dreamwave. Back when Image Comics first started, it was actually divided into various studios. Rob Liefeld had his own studio, Todd McFarlane had his own studio, etc., etc. In 1996, Pat and Roger Lee created Dreamwave Productions under Image, and several years later broke off to form an actual comic publisher with the same name. They had a mixture of licensed and original properties, but probably the most noted was when they acquired the license to do Transformers comics. The revival of the Generation 1 characters proved wildly successful. Sure, they weren't breaking the top 10, but for an independent company, they were doing pretty damn well. But nowadays, if you look up Dreamwave, you might notice that they're not around anymore. Well, that's because the guys who ran Dreamwave, in particular today's artist Pat Lee, were a bunch of jackasses. There's a lot to go through here, but let me try to summarize as best as I can. Pat Lee, despite being a self-described superstar artist, only actually drew the Transformers themselves for many of the issues, leaving other people in the company to have to draw in backgrounds and other characters. What's worse, his involvement in outside projects had him hire other artists to do the issues, and then never credit them for working on it. Speaking of hiring other people, as the years went on, many freelance artists and writers who were doing work for the company filed a lawsuit against Dreamwave for not paying them. At all. And there's a very good reason why Okay, there wasn't a very good reason why they weren't getting paid, but there was a reason. The owners of Dreamwave were spending money on personal items and charging it to the company. For example, Dreamwave had a company-owned Porsche. And naturally, they didn't tell their employees that their company was going down the toilet, and in fact lied to them and said the company was doing great even when they had over $1 million in debt. By the time the company declared bankruptcy, they had transferred most of the assets of the company to themselves, including the Porsche, and blamed the failing Canadian economy on the death of Dreamwave. To make matters better, they also started a new company called Dream Engine and proceeded to do the exact same damn thing, to the extent where Pat Lee even spent company funds to promote his girlfriend in a beauty pageant. And Pat Lee is still around. After an interview a few months ago about a ridiculously dumbass series he wants to make called Widow Warriors, I decided it was finally time to tell you all about him and his embezzling ways. And a very special thanks to David Willis of Short Packed fame for donating these issues to me. It's time to talk about Transformers again, and unlike last time where the focus was on Dreamwave, this time we're going back to the same year as the last 2 weeks worth of comics. 1993. As I said in the last Transformers review, my greatest exposure to the original Transformers, aside from Beast Wars, came not from the cartoon, but the comics, where I had read them all online thanks to some random website that had posted up scans of every issue of the main series and the Headmasters miniseries. No, I don't have the website address. It was at least a decade ago, and I think when I did try to track it down again at some point, the website had fallen apart anyway. For those of you wanting more legitimate channels, though, IDW did release the original Transformers series in trade form over 6 volumes. Some of them appear to be out of print, but it shouldn't be too hard to track them down if you want. Otherwise, another publisher, Titan Books, evidently released them in trade as well, since fans sent me some trades of them, including The Car Wash of Doom. Yes, we'll get to it eventually. I don't know how the Titan Books version handles this, but the IDW one had to make a little correction here and there. You see, Spider-Man guest starred in the 3rd issue of the original Transformers comics, and obviously IDW doesn't own Spidey. As such, they completely blacked out his character on the cover and just wrote up a detailed summary of what happened in the issue. Marvel has had a fascinating relationship with its licensed properties. Most of them, especially during the 80s at least, were considered to be in continuity with the rest of the Marvel Universe. Hell, some of the aspects of those comics are still part of Marvel canon. One example I like to think of is Aaron Stack, aka Machine Man, who was introduced in the 2001 A Space Odyssey comics. And yes, trust me, we'll be getting to those eventually. Or the mythology around the Space Knights, in particular villains called Dire Wraiths. They came from a toy tie-in series called Rom Space Knight, an excellent series that unfortunately has never been collected because Rom himself is owned by Hasbro. Except everything that was invented in the comics is owned by Marvel, so while Rom himself isn't allowed to be there, his supporting cast, his planet, his enemies, they are all okay. Hell, if you want to go back a bit, I mentioned last year that US-1 has made a reappearance in the Marvel Universe. A small reappearance, but a reappearance nonetheless. And that was a tie-in to friggin' slot cars. Transformers, however, never really took off as a part of the Marvel Universe beyond the Spider-Man appearance, and that's probably for the best, considering the sheer scale of the things and the problems that would arise by having these things just running around and whatnot. So Marvel's Transformers series lasted 80 issues and ended on a high note. There's a lot I have to leave out of this, but here's the long and short of it. The war between the Autobots and Decepticons is over. Optimus Prime has come back to life for like the 50th time, and the Autobots now have full control over Cybertron, their homeworld, and the Decepticons are in exile. The series ended in 1991, and that was that. However, 2 years later, to correspond with the Generation 2 Transformers toys being released, it was decided to bring the series back. What resulted was a 12-issue maxi-series that we're here to talk about today. So why this one and not the long-awaited Car Wash of Doom? Well, let me put it this way. In researching this comic, I saw it described as gritty. Let that sink in, people. Transformers...
Eat my dust, bird brain! You couldn't hit an Autobot with a moonbeam!
Gritty.
I killed 3 men tonight. Tortured them first. You might say I've been working my way up the food chain.
Transformers.
We knew you were anxious to get back to Cybertron.
But at least you could have waited for us.
Sorry, Prime. The ship was full.
And gritty.
I try to slow my heart down and breathe the fire out of my lungs. My muscles make me 1,000 promises of pain to come.
One gimmick for this cover was not enough for this though, my friends. As you can see, the cover is split down the middle, unfolding to reveal a spread that has the Autobots and Decepticons fighting one another. Or fighting the ground in Grimlock's case. It's far too chaotic and the art style makes it difficult to tell who's fighting who. And wait, does that Transformer have a human face behind his visor? What the hell? Oh, and let's not talk about the foreshortening or the sizes of characters' guns. Where the hell was Optimus stashing the gun that's as big as his leg? Or this guy? No, I don't know who he is. What part of his vehicle mode transformed into that gun? Archie's continued existence never ceases to baffle me. I just don't get it. What is it about the continuing adventures of an indecisive redhead and his gluttonous friend that allows it to continue for 70 friggin' years? Yeah, as you can guess, I'm not a fan of Archie comics. I don't hate it, it's just there, and I don't get why it's still there. Admittedly, I could just be biased because I love superheroes, and superheroes really do dominate the medium, but I hope you can understand my confusion. The cover's okay, featuring Archie hanging a bit of mistletoe over a doorway and some other guy, Richie, I think? How the hell would I know? Laying the moves on Veronica. Really, the thing that bugs me is that a third of the cover is taken up by the logo and tiny versions of the Archie characters inside of a stocking. It's not the tiny Archie characters bit that gets to me. That's kind of amusing in a way. Honey, I Shrunk the Archie, I guess. No, it's just the logo and all taking up so much space. It always irritates me. Behind them, the much better drawn Reggie and, Betty, I think? I don't know. Half these people look exactly the same, but with different haircuts. Anyway, Reggie grabs Betty and says that he's got his. I don't find that a bit funny. Well, you win some, you lose some. They can't all be gems. Ha ha ha! I find it amusing that I referred to you as a bag, Betty, meaning that I pretty much insulted you. I'm laughing off the fact that you rejected me despite my clever insult. Why am I amused by this? Number 12. The Transformers comics did break the top 10 lists. Yeah, I don't know how I screwed this one up, but I did. During my review of Dreamwave's Transformers number 4 and 5, I stated that the comics, while popular, never broke the top 10 lists in sales. It turns out the sales charts I'd been reading were from 2004 and covering reprints and whatnot, when I should have been looking at the sales for 2002. In fact, Transformers comics held the number 1 spot in sales from April through September of 2002. And even after that was over with, other Dreamwave Transformers comics were within the top 20 for a few months following that. Hell, even the issues I reviewed held the number 2 and number 1 spot for their respective months. And the only reason that number 4 wasn't in the number 1 spot was because another Transformers comic held that spot. It's also kind of head-scratching that this is the case. Consider that these were the books where Pat Lee couldn't even draw the correct number of wheels on Optimus Prime's truck mode. Let's not even get into the fact that the windows on Optimus's chest don't look like a truck. And yet they were beating out books like the Ultimates, 3 X-Men series, and Ultimate Spider-Man. Yeah, Marvel held every other spot except number 10 in April 2010, which was an issue of Image Comics' G.I. Joe series, another 80s franchise. Well, Dreamwave and Pat Lee may have been some of the scummiest, non-paying, crappy things ever to happen in the comic industry, but you can't argue with those results, and I screwed up in giving credit where credit is due. Number 9. I shouldn't talk about Archie or the Transformers without doing more research. I'm not entirely certain how you people found my Archie Giant Series Magazine number 452 review. I completely forgot I had done that video, almost as if I only recorded it a few weeks ago when I was 40 pounds heavier than I was in 2009, but whatever, it's out there. Many were rather upset with that review and my Transformers Generation 2 number 1 video because it seemed like I didn't do adequate research on the material before walking into them. Actually, one particular point that a lot of people had a problem with was that I didn't know that one of the Dinobots I saw on the fold-out cover was named Snarl. Okay, people, not only has it been years since I read the 80 issues of Marvel's Transformers comics, but even when I watched a good chunk of the original cartoon, the only one of the Dinobots who I ever gave a damn about was Grimlock. You will forgive me if I didn't know one guy's name in a franchise that has had hundreds of Transformers. Similarly, I didn't recognize a few faces from Archie comics, mostly because I am not a reader of Archie comics. Hell, I had to look up Reggie's name on Wikipedia. Both of these reviews have a similar thing that people feel I did, failing to do the research. And to those people, those frustrating commenters and viewers, I have only one thing to say! Yeah, you're probably right. I freely admit it, I don't care about Archie. At all. The fact that it's still alive just makes me confused as all hell. And yeah, I know it's the only comic book that's still sold in grocery stores or the like, but in an age where the comic book medium is continuing to struggle against various other mediums, Archie's survival is all the more baffling. When it comes to Transformers, I'm very much a casual fan of the franchise. As such, I admit I'm not the best qualified to discuss either, and my jokes may not resonate as effectively. However, I do believe in an old adage, every comic is someone's first. While there are various ways to approach that, I take the attitude that a creative team should put forth their best effort in every comic they write and draw, since this could be a comic that gets a reader hooked and wanting to read more. And when it came to the Archie Christmas comic and that Transformers Generation 2 comic, I felt they failed in that regard. However, I probably should have done just even a teensy bit more research to try to figure out names and whatnot. Pretty much a failure on my account. Oh, and speaking of failures, the Pretenders Transformers were one of the most poorly executed ideas ever. So why the hell were they in the Generation 2 comic?